Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the Great Council Chamber of Zenith 7, her hands folded behind her back. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 47 different alien species. Above her, the domed ceiling showed the stars, thousands of worlds united under one government. It should have been beautiful. Today it felt like a tomb. The Zenthari counselor, Vethkara, spoke in his clicking language. The translator in Sarah's ear turned his words into cold, dismissive sentences. The matter is settled. The human colony of New Olympus will be transferred to Zenthari control. You have 6 months to evacuate. Sarah stepped forward. She had practiced this speech for days. Counselor, please reconsider. New Olympus has been our home for 80 years. 50,000 families live there. Children were born there. We built farms, cities, schools. You cannot just take it. Vethkara's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Around the chamber, other aliens watched with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. The Vextral delegates made their chittering laugh sound. The Quellan representative turned away, bored. Ambassador Chen, Vethkara said, his voice dripping with condescension. Your species has been part of this council for 200 years. In that time, you have contributed nothing of value. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is violent. Your world is a death trap of storms, predators, and diseases. We have tolerated your presence because the Galactic Charter demands it. But tolerance has limits. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. 200 years. 2 centuries of following every rule, bowing to every demand, accepting every insult. Humanity had come to the stars hoping to find friends. Instead, they found aliens who looked down on them like children, or worse, like trained animals. The Zenthari need New Olympus for expansion, Vethkara continued. Your people will be compensated. The vote has already been taken. 43 in favor, 3 abstaining, 1 opposed. The matter is closed. Sarah looked at the one council member who had voted for humanity. Ambassador Keelan of the Helix species gave her a small, sad gesture with his tentacles. He had tried. It had not been enough. Then let me say this clearly, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. New Olympus is not just dirt and rock. It is our home. Those people trusted the Galactic Council to protect them. They believed in peace and cooperation. You are teaching them a different lesson today. Vethkara made a dismissive gesture. Deathworlders always react with emotion. This is why your kind will never truly belong here. You lack the civilization required for proper galactic citizenship. This council is adjourned. Sarah stood there as the alien delegates filed out. Some glanced at her with pity. Most simply ignored her. She had failed. After 200 years of trying to prove humanity belonged, they were still nothing more than primitives from a dangerous world. Captain Marcus Webb waited for her outside the chamber. His dress uniform was crisp and perfect as always, but Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. Marcus commanded the small fleet of human ships that escorted diplomatic missions. 20 vessels, lightly armed, designed to look friendly and non-threatening. I heard, Marcus said quietly. The whole ship heard. That bastard didn't even mute his microphone. Sarah nodded. She felt numb. Get the evacuation ships to New Olympus. We have 6 months. Sarah, Marcus said, using her first name instead of her rank. This is wrong. We can't just let them. We don't have a choice, Sarah interrupted. Earth's orders were clear. No conflicts, no wars. We follow the rules. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but military discipline won. Yes, Ambassador. I'll give the orders. 3 days later, Sarah was in her quarters when the news came. She was packing, preparing for the journey home. The Galactic Council had made it clear humanity's diplomatic mission was no longer welcome on Zenith 7. They would return to Earth in disgrace. The emergency communication came through on her private channel. Marcus's face appeared, and Sarah knew immediately something terrible had happened. His expression was carved from stone. Sarah, New Olympus is gone. The evacuation ship, a Zenthari cruiser, fired on it. 3,000 dead, mostly families, children. The room seemed to tilt. Sarah grabbed her desk to stay upright. What? How? They're calling it a navigation error. An accident. The Zenthari government has expressed regret but says it was unavoidable. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless in the way of someone holding back a hurricane of rage. They're offering no compensation, no apology, just regret. Sarah felt something break inside her. Not her spirit. Something else. Something that had been holding her back for 200 years. The part of her that believed patience and diplomacy would eventually win. That part died. Her personal communicator buzzed. A message from Earth. Priority level maximum. She opened it with shaking hands. The message was 3 words long. Protocol suspended. Come home. Sarah looked at Marcus's face on the screen. She saw her own expression reflected there. 2 centuries of restraint, of following rules, of accepting insults and setbacks because Earth had ordered them to be good neighbors. All of it had led to this moment. 3,000 humans dead, and the aliens called it an unfortunate accident. Marcus, Sarah said slowly, begin recall procedures. All human diplomatic staff, all personnel, all ships, we're leaving. And then? Marcus asked. Sarah's smile was cold and terrible. Then the galaxy learns what Deathworlders really are. Behind her, through the window, she could see the human escort fleet. 20 small ships, designed to look harmless. The aliens thought that was humanity's entire navy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. For 200 years, humanity had worn the mask of civilized diplomacy. That mask was coming off. And underneath was the face of Earth, the death world that had forged humanity in fire and blood and survival. The Zenthari had made a fatal mistake. They had pushed humanity too far. Now they would learn why the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was not a weapon or a warship. It was a human who had finally decided to stop being patient. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood on the command deck of the EDF Titan's Fury, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. She had waited 200 years for this moment. Well, not her personally. She was only 63. But humanity had waited. The entire species had held its breath, playing the role of peaceful explorers while the galaxy mocked them. Now the mocking would stop. Admiral, her communications officer said, all diplomatic ships have returned. Ambassador Chen is requesting permission to come aboard. Granted, and send her to my ready room. Catherine turned away from the viewport. She had work to do. The Galactic Council thought humanity had 200 ships, small exploration vessels with light weapons and basic shields. They thought humans were struggling to build a proper space fleet, held back by primitive technology and limited resources. The truth was much different, and that truth was about to shatter the galaxy's comfortable assumptions. 20 minutes later, Sarah Chen entered the ready room. She looked tired. More than tired. She looked like someone who had carried a heavy weight for too long and was ready to put it down. Ambassador, Catherine said, gesturing to a chair. Or should I say Commander Chen? Your new rank came through this morning. Sarah sat down heavily. I don't feel like a commander. I feel like I failed. You did exactly what Earth asked you to do, Catherine said. You kept them distracted. You made them comfortable. You let them think they were superior. And while they laughed at our backward technology and primitive culture, we built the real fleet. She activated the holographic display on her desk. Numbers and ship classifications filled the air between them. Sarah's eyes widened. 15,000 warships, Catherine said quietly. Each one built in secret in our own solar system, hidden from their sensors. Each one designed specifically to fight aliens from low-gravity worlds. No inertial dampeners because we don't need them. Humans can handle the G-forces that would turn their crews into paste. Sarah stared at the numbers. 15,000. They think we have 200. They also think our weapons are primitive, Catherine continued. They've seen our diplomatic ships with their laser arrays and missile pods. Standard galactic technology. What they haven't seen are the railguns that can punch through any shield in their fleet. They haven't seen the nuclear-pumped lasers. They haven't seen the kinetic kill vehicles that approach relativistic speeds. Catherine pulled up another file. This one showed a star map with human colony worlds marked in blue, except one world was marked in red. New Olympus, the colony wasn't evacuated, Catherine said. The civilian evacuation ship that the Zenthari destroyed? That was the Hermes, a Q ship, modified to look like a civilian transport but carrying enough firepower to destroy a battle group. Sarah's mouth opened. The families. The children. You said 3,000 died. I lied. Everyone lied. We needed the Zenthari to think they'd won. The Hermes had a crew of 200 Marines in combat suits. When the Zenthari cruiser fired, the Hermes hit back. Hard. That cruiser and its entire escort fleet is now debris floating in the new Olympus system. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. So those 3,000 people are safe on New Olympus, which is now the most heavily fortified human world outside Earth. The Zenthari think they killed civilians. The galaxy thinks we suffered a tragedy, and while they're congratulating themselves, we're moving our fleets into position. Catherine stood and walked to the window. Below, Sarah could see ships. So many ships. They stretched into the distance, filling the orbital space around Earth like a steel constellation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts, all bearing the blue and white colors of the Earth Defense Force. For 200 years we pretended to be weak, Catherine said. We let them insult us, demean us, treat us like stupid children. We followed every rule in their precious galactic charter, and they responded by trying to steal our worlds and killing what they thought were our civilians. She turned back to Sarah, and her eyes were hard. That ends now. The sheep's clothing comes off. The wolf is coming out to play. Sarah thought about the council chamber, about Vethkara's dismissive tone, about 2 centuries of humanity bowing and scraping and accepting abuse, about 3,000 people the aliens thought they had murdered without consequence. What are your orders, Admiral? Sarah asked. Catherine smiled. It was not a kind smile. I'm broadcasting a message to the Galactic Council in 1 hour. You should be there for it. But first I want you to meet someone. She led Sarah through the ship's corridors. The Titan's fury was enormous, built on a scale that would shock the alien races who thought human ships were small and cramped. They passed Marines in powered armor, their faces young and eager. They passed weapons bays where munitions were being loaded. They passed ready rooms where pilots checked their fighters. They arrived at a training deck. Inside, 24 humans in light armor were running combat drills. Sarah watched as they moved through an obstacle course that simulated boarding an enemy ship. They flowed like water, covering each other, communicating with hand signals. One Marine kicked off a wall, rotated 90 degrees in midair, and put 3 rounds through a target before landing. The whole thing took 2 seconds. That drill would kill most alien species, Catherine said. The G-forces alone would snap their bones. But we're from Earth. We evolved dodging lions and hunting mammoths. We climbed mountains and crossed oceans in wooden boats. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We are persistence predators from a death world. And for 200 years we pretended to be harmless. The lead Marine approached and saluted. His name tag read Park, Admiral. The first wave is ready for deployment. Excellent, Commander Park. You'll be leading the vanguard assault on the Zenthari border worlds. How do you feel about that? Park's smile was fierce. Ready to show them why humans don't forgive, ma'am. Catherine dismissed him and turned back to Sarah. That's the difference between us and them. They have soldiers who follow orders. We have warriors who understand what they're fighting for. Every human in this fleet knows what happened at New Olympus. They know about 200 years of insults and abuse, and they're ready to remind the galaxy why you don't push Deathworlders. They returned to the command deck. The hour had passed. Catherine took her position at the center of the room. Open a broadcast channel to the Galactic Council. Maximum priority. Make sure every species in the galaxy can hear this. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Catherine looked into the camera and her expression was ice and iron. Attention, Galactic Council. This is Admiral Catherine Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. For 200 years, humanity has sought peace. We have followed your rules, accepted your conditions, and endured your contempt. We believed in diplomacy and cooperation. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. That belief died when the Zenthari murdered 3,000 of our civilians. You thought humans were weak. You thought our ships were few and our weapons primitive. You were wrong. Behind her, through the viewport, the assembled human fleet became visible. 15,000 warships, their running lights blazing against the black of space. A display of military might the galaxy had never seen from humanity. You wanted to see what Deathworlders can really do. Now you'll learn why diplomacy was mercy. The Zenthari will answer for their crimes, and every species that supported them, that voted to steal our worlds, that laughed at our pain, will learn a simple truth. Catherine's smile was terrible and cold. Humanity is patient, but our patience has limits. And you just found them. Warlord Thexnor of the Zenthari Empire watched the defense grid displays with growing confusion. 50 of his fleet outposts had gone dark in the last 3 hours. Not destroyed, just dark. No distress signals, no warnings, nothing. They simply stopped responding. Status report, he demanded, his forearms gesturing at the tactical displays. Unknown, Warlord, his sensor officer replied. The young Zenthari's scales were pale with stress. We're detecting no weapons fire, no energy signatures. The bases are just gone. Thexnor had commanded fleets for 40 cycles. He had fought in the Quellan border wars and the Vextral incursion. He understood warfare. This was something else. This was precision. This was surgical. This was terrifying. Send reconnaissance drones to the nearest dark zone, he ordered. I want to know what we're facing. The answer came 20 minutes later. The reconnaissance drone transmitted images before it was destroyed. Thexnor stared at the screen, and for the first time in his life he felt genuine fear. Human ships. Hundreds of them. They moved wrong. Too fast, pulling maneuvers that should have been impossible. The drone's last image showed a human destroyer accelerating at 30 gravities, turning on its axis, and firing some kind of projectile weapon that moved too fast to track. Sound the alarm, Thexnor said quietly. All fleets to battle stations. Contact the homeworld. Tell them the humans are coming. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the EDF Midnight Runner, watching the Zenthari defense station try to target his ship. They were too slow. Human vessels were built for speed and violence. The aliens had to use inertial dampeners to keep their crews alive during maneuvers. Humans just gritted their teeth and took the G-forces. Target locked, his weapons officer reported. Railgun ready. Fire, Marcus said calmly. The railgun spat a tungsten slug at a fraction of the speed of light. The Zenthari station's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving missiles, might as well have been paper. The slug punched through and the station came apart in a silent explosion. Next target, Marcus ordered. This was the 5th Zenthari military installation his ship had destroyed today. It would not be the last. All across the Zenthari border, human ships were striking simultaneously. 50 different systems, coordinated attacks, overwhelming force. The Zenthari had expected war to be civilized. They thought there would be warnings, negotiations, formal battle lines. They were learning that humans fought different. Captain, his communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the Zenthari fleet. They're requesting parley. Marcus smiled without humor. Tell them no. We tried talking for 200 years. Now we do things our way. On the planet below, Zenthari civilians were evacuating cities near military targets. Human doctrine was clear. Avoid civilian casualties where possible, but military targets were fair game regardless of location. The Zenthari had built their bases near population centers, thinking it would protect them. They were wrong. Commander Sarah Chen, now leading the converted diplomatic corps, watched the tactical displays from her command ship. Each blue dot was a human vessel. The red dots were Zenthari ships, and they were disappearing rapidly. General Chen, her aide said, using her new rank. The Zenthari are trying to form a defensive line at their 3rd planet. They've gathered about 200 ships. Sarah considered this. 200 ships was a significant force by galactic standards. But galactic standards were built around low-intensity conflict. Humans had studied warfare for their entire history. They knew how to fight, and more importantly, they knew how to win. Send in the Valkyrie wing, Sarah ordered. Let's show them what human fighter craft can do. The Valkyrie fighters were small, fast, and deadly. Each one carried a single pilot in a crash couch that could handle 15 gravities of sustained acceleration. They launched from their carrier ships like angry hornets, streaking toward the Zenthari defensive line. The Zenthari tried to target them with their point defense systems. They were far too slow. The human fighters jinked and rolled, moving in 3 dimensions with a fluidity that alien pilots couldn't match. They were through the defensive line in seconds. Then they deployed their payloads. Each fighter carried 12 micromissiles with plasma warheads. The missiles tracked their targets with quantum-paired guidance systems that couldn't be jammed. The Zenthari fleet tried to evade, but their ships were large and sluggish compared to human craft. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, the Zenthari defensive line was gone. Wreckage floated in orbit around their colony world, and human ships moved into bombardment positions around military installations. Counselor Vethakara watched the reports coming in from the front lines. They made no sense. His people were being slaughtered. Fleets that should have held for months were destroyed in hours. Bases that should have been impregnable fell to human attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. He had authorized communication attempts. Everyone was ignored. The humans weren't interested in talking. They were demonstrating a very simple point. Actions had consequences. Counselor, his military advisor said, "The homeworld defense fleet is ready. Surely the humans won't." "They will," Vethakara interrupted. He understood now. The humans had been holding back for 2 centuries. Everything the galaxy had seen was a mask. The real military might of Earth had been hidden, waiting. And now it was unleashed. "How many worlds have we lost?" Vethakara asked. 43 colony worlds, 12 core systems. The homeworld is isolated. They've cut our supply lines and destroyed our shipyards. Vethakara did the math in his head. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, the humans had dismantled an empire that had stood for 3,000 years. And they had done it with surgical precision, minimal collateral damage to civilians but absolute destruction of military capabilities. "Contact the Galactic Council," Vethakara said. "Tell them we need intervention. The humans must be stopped before—" "Counselor," the communications officer interrupted. "The Council is unfragmented. 17 species have declared neutrality. 8 have offered tribute to humanity. The rest are forming defensive pacts, but no one will help us. They're afraid. Of course they were afraid. The galaxy had built its civilization on the assumption that high-gravity Deathworlders couldn't develop advanced technology. That assumption was now revealed as catastrophically wrong. Humans had the technology, and they had something else the galaxy had forgotten. The killer instinct born from millions of years of survival on a planet that tried to murder them daily. On the bridge of Titan's Fury, Admiral Morrison reviewed the battle reports. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Human casualties were minimal, mostly damage to ships rather than personnel losses. Xanthari casualties were enormous, but mostly military. Her commanders knew the difference between war and genocide. "Admiral," her intelligence officer said, "we're detecting massive fleet movements in the Quellan sector. Multiple species are forming a coalition. Early estimates put their combined fleet at 50,000 ships. Morrison had expected this. The galaxy couldn't let humanity rampage unchecked. They would try to stop the human advance with overwhelming numbers. They didn't understand that numbers weren't everything. "How long until the Xanthari homeworld surrenders?" she asked. "Our blockade is complete. Their military is broken. Our analysts estimate 3 days before their government capitulates." Morrison nodded. "Good. Once the Xanthari surrender, we'll address the coalition. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders go to war." She looked at the star map, at the red markers showing human fleet positions. They were spread across Xanthari space like a net, tightening slowly. The prey was caught. Now came the final lesson. The galaxy had mocked humanity for 2 centuries. They had called humans primitive, violent, barely civilized. They had been right about the violence, but they had mistaken restraint for weakness. Humans understood violence. They had been born into it, shaped by it, perfected it, and now the galaxy was learning what humanity had always known. The most dangerous predator was the one you didn't see coming until it was too late. Ambassador Keelan of the Helix species watched the Emergency Galactic Council session with a sense of profound dread. The chamber that had once held 47 species now held representatives from only 32. 7 species had been conquered by humanity, their military forces destroyed, their governments forced to accept occupation. 8 more had simply fled, evacuating their territories near human space and begging for asylum from other powers. The remaining species were terrified. "We must form a unified response," Counselor Zixtar of the Quellan announced. His voice carried the artificial calm of someone trying to control panic. "The humans cannot be allowed to continue their rampage unchecked. We have assembled a coalition fleet of 50,000 vessels. Surely numbers will prevail where individual fleets have failed." Keelan wanted to laugh, wanted to scream. These fools still didn't understand. He had been one of the few to study human history, to read their literature, to try to understand the species from the death world called Earth. What he learned had kept him awake during rest cycles. Humans were persistence predators. They didn't give up. They didn't tire. They didn't stop until their prey was dead, or they were. And now the entire galaxy was their prey. "The coalition is a mistake," Keelan said quietly. Counselor Zixtar, may I speak? The Helix have remained neutral in this conflict, Zixtar said dismissively. You have no standing to advise on military matters. The Helix have survived, Keelan corrected, because we were kind to humanity during their probation period. We voted for their colonies to remain autonomous. We treated them with respect. And now they leave us alone. He gestured at the empty seats around the chamber. Everyone who mocked them, who took advantage of them, who treated them as inferior. Where are they now? The chamber fell silent. I studied human history, Keelan continued. They have been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. They have weapons called nuclear bombs that they dropped on their own species. Their planet has tried to kill them with diseases, predators, weather, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages. And they survived everything. They thrived. Do you truly believe that 50,000 ships will stop them when everything else has failed? Then what do you suggest? Zixtar demanded. We surrender? We let these barbarians dictate terms to the entire galaxy? I suggest we acknowledge reality, Keelan said. The humans are not barbarians. They are more advanced than we thought, more capable, and far more dangerous. And we made them angry. Very, very angry. In the Procyon system, the Coalition fleet assembled. 12 species had contributed ships, creating an armada that was supposed to be unstoppable. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Admirals from different species argued about tactics and command structure, but they all agreed on one thing. Humanity had to be stopped. Commander James Park watched the Coalition fleet from his stealth scout ship. The aliens had no idea he was there. Human stealth technology was decades ahead of anything the galaxy possessed. His ship could sit within weapons range and remain completely invisible. Command, this is Park. I have eyes on the Coalition fleet, confirming 50,000 plus vessels. They're trying to organize into battle formations. Admiral Morrison's voice came back over the quantum-paired communicator. Excellent, Commander. Hold position. The main fleet will arrive in 6 hours. We want them to feel confident, Park smiled. The Coalition thought they had time to organize. They thought the humans would see their massive fleet and back down. Or at least negotiate. They were about to learn another lesson about Deathworlders. Humans didn't negotiate from weakness. And right now, humanity held all the power. 6 hours later, the human fleet arrived. Not through normal space, slowly and predictably. They came through quantum jump points, a technology the aliens believed was purely theoretical. One moment, empty space. The next moment, 3,000 human warships materialized in perfect formation. The Coalition fleet panicked. Ships scrambled to target the new arrivals. Weapon systems powered up, but the humans were already moving. The Battle of Procyon would be studied for generations, not because it was glorious, but because it demonstrated the fundamental difference between galactic warfare and human warfare. The aliens fought with formations, tactics, and strategies designed for honorable combat between civilized species. Humans fought to win. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each targeting a different section of the Coalition formation. They didn't engage in long-range artillery duels. They closed to knife-fighting range, where their superior acceleration and maneuverability gave them an overwhelming advantage. A Quellan battleship tried to target a human destroyer. The human ship accelerated at 20 gravities, rotated 90 degrees while maintaining its velocity vector, and put 3 railgun slugs through the battleship's reactor core. The whole maneuver took 8 seconds. The battleship exploded. The human destroyer was already targeting its next victim. Coalition fighters launched to screen their capital ships. Human fighters met them in a storm of plasma and metal. The alien pilots were skilled, but they were used to simulation training in safe environments. Human pilots trained by actually flying through Earth's atmosphere, dodging storms and handling equipment failures. In combat, that experience showed. The Coalition tried to use their numbers advantage. They attempted to surround human ships to overwhelm them with firepower. But human ships didn't fight like alien vessels. When surrounded, they didn't retreat. They became more dangerous. Human doctrine called it the cornered rat maneuver. Attack everything within range, cause maximum damage. Trust your armor and your crew to survive. It worked. 12 hours into the battle, the Coalition fleet was losing. Not slowly, not gracefully. They were being systematically destroyed by a force 1/20th their size. Human casualties were minimal. Coalition casualties were catastrophic. Counselor Zixtar watched the battle reports with growing horror. His species had contributed 10,000 ships to the coalition. Half of them were gone. The rest were scattered, fleeing or surrendering to humans who hadn't even bothered to offer terms. He opened a communication channel to the human flagship. He didn't know if they would answer, but he had to try. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on his screen. She looked calm, almost bored. Behind her, he could see the organized chaos of a command deck during battle, humans working together with frightening efficiency. "Counselor Zixtar," Morrison said, "have you finally decided to stop wasting my time and your ships?" We surrender," Zixtar said. The words tasted like ash. "The coalition surrenders. Please call off your attack." "No," Morrison said simply. Zixtar felt his blood freeze. "What, but we're surrendering?" The rules of war are simple," Morrison interrupted. "You assembled this fleet to destroy us, to stop humanity from seeking justice for crimes committed against us. You made your choice. Now you live with the consequences. But our ships are helpless. You're slaughtering us." Morrison's expression hardened. Were the families on New Olympus helpless when you thought the Zenthari killed them? Was humanity helpless for 200 years while you mocked us, insulted us, and stole from us? You thought we were weak. You thought we would accept any abuse because we wanted to be part of your civilized galaxy. She leaned forward, and her eyes were ice. Now you're learning what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. When you push a Deathworlder past the breaking point. We tried to be your friends. You made us your enemies. This is what human enemies look like." The communication cut off. Zixtar sat in his command chamber, listening to the reports of ships dying, crews abandoning vessels, and the coalition fleet dissolving into chaos. In 14 hours, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled was broken, and humanity had done it almost casually. On Earth, in the command center deep beneath Geneva, analysts watched the battle data stream in. One analyst, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez, studied the patterns with growing concern. "The aggression levels are higher than projected," she said to her supervisor. "Some captains are exceeding their rules of engagement parameters." Her supervisor, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, nodded. "War changes people, even humans. We spent 200 years teaching ourselves to be peaceful. Now we're remembering how to be warriors. It's a difficult transition." "Sir, what happens when the war ends? When we've beaten everyone who opposed us? Will we be able to go back to being peaceful?" The supervisor was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. But I know this. The galaxy will never see us as harmless again. The mask is off. The wolf is out, and I'm not sure we can put it back in the sheep pen." Above Earth, the human fleet prepared for the next phase of operations. The Zenthari were occupied. The coalition was broken. But there were still species that had supported humanity's oppression. Still governments that needed to answer for their crimes. Admiral Morrison looked at the list of targets. Each one represented a species that had voted to take New Olympus. Each one had laughed at human diplomatic efforts. Each one would learn the price of their contempt. The galaxy was burning, and humanity held the torch. 18 months after the war began, Admiral Catherine Morrison stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chamber on Zenith 7. The room looked the same as it had when Ambassador Sarah Chen stood here and watched humanity be stripped of their colony. But everything else had changed. The chamber held representatives from 40 species. 7 were gone, their civilizations destroyed when they chose to fight humanity to the last. Others had been forcibly relocated, their military capabilities permanently dismantled, their governments replaced with regimes that understood the new reality. Humanity was no longer asking for permission. They were in charge. "The Terran Accords are non-negotiable," Morrison said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Every species will acknowledge human sovereignty. Every species will pay reparations for 200 years of exploitation. Every species that participated in acts of aggression against humanity will submit to demilitarization protocols." She looked at the assembled aliens. Some met her gaze with resentment, others with fear, a few like Ambassador Keelan with something that might have been understanding. Furthermore, Morrison continued, humanity is establishing the Shield Worlds program. Any species that requests our protection will receive it. We will not allow the strong to prey upon the weak. The galaxy spent millennia letting powerful species dominate weaker ones. That ends today. Counselor Zixtar, his species reduced from a major power to a minor client state, spoke quietly. You say you fight for the weak, but you've destroyed 7 civilizations. How many billions died because of your vengeance? Morrison's expression didn't change. 4 million humans died in this war, mostly military personnel who knew the risks. As for the 7 species that were destroyed, they chose extinction over surrender. We offered terms. They refused. We didn't commit genocide, Counselor. We didn't target civilians. We destroyed military forces and infrastructure. But when species chose to fight to the last rather than accept peace, we honored their decision. She gestured at the displays showing casualty figures. The Xanthari lost 3 billion people, but their civilians survived. They have new leadership now. Leadership that understands cooperation instead of conquest. The coalition species that attacked us at Procyon still exist, still have their colonies and populations. We didn't come to destroy. We came to teach a lesson about consequences. In a small cafe on Earth in a city rebuilt after the war, Captain Marcus Webb sat with General Sarah Chen. They had both retired from active duty, though their ranks remained honorary. Marcus looked older than his 60 years. Sarah looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Do you think it was worth it? Marcus asked, staring into his coffee. All of it. The war, the death, the destruction. Sarah was quiet for a long time. I remember standing in that chamber listening to Vethakara tell me that New Olympus didn't matter. That human lives didn't matter. That we were primitives who should be grateful for any scraps the galaxy threw us. She looked up at Marcus. 3,000 people died on that evacuation ship. At least we thought they did. Even though it was a trick, the Xanthari fired on what they believed was a civilian vessel. They did it knowing families were aboard, children, and they felt no remorse. That doesn't answer my question, Marcus said. I know, Sarah replied, because I don't have an answer. We stopped being the victims. We proved that humanity couldn't be pushed around anymore. But we also became the thing we hated. We became the bullies, the conquerors. We burned the galaxy to teach it a lesson. Marcus nodded slowly. I visit the memorial every month. The names of the 4 million who died. Some of them were kids, Sarah, 18, 19 years old. They joined up because they were angry about New Olympus. They wanted revenge, and we gave it to them. But was revenge worth their lives? On the rebuilt colony of New Olympus, children played in parks named after fallen soldiers. The planet had been fortified during the war, turned into a symbol of human resistance. Now it was a symbol of something else, human determination to hold on to what was theirs. Commander James Park walked through the memorial gardens, reading the names carved into black stone. He had led the Vanguard assaults, the most dangerous missions. He had survived when many hadn't. Survivor's guilt was something human psychologists understood well. Earth's history was full of soldiers returning from war, carrying ghosts that never left. Commander Park. He turned to see a young girl, maybe 10 years old. She held a flower in her hand. My dad told me about you, she said. He said you fought in the war, that you kept us safe. Park knelt down to her level. What's your dad's name? Lieutenant Michael Torres. He died at the Battle of Procyon. Park closed his eyes. He knew Torres. A good pilot, a better man. Gone in an instant when a coalition missile got through his fighter's defenses. Your dad was a hero, Park said quietly. He fought so people like you could grow up safe. The girl nodded, then placed the flower at the base of the memorial. Do you think the war was good? It was a child's question, direct and honest. Park didn't have a child's answer. War is never good, he said finally. But sometimes it's necessary. The galaxy was treating us badly. We tried talking for a long time. When that didn't work, we had to fight. Did we win? Yes, Park said, we won. But winning a war isn't the same as winning peace. That's what we're trying to figure out now. In the Galactic Council chamber, Admiral Morrison finished outlining the terms of the new galactic order. The Terran Accords would reshape how species interacted, with humans as enforcers. Trade would be regulated, military buildups would be monitored, acts of aggression would be met with swift human response. It was empire in all but name. Ambassador Keelan rose to speak. Admiral Morrison, I have a question. You say humanity fights to protect the weak, but who protects the galaxy from humanity? You've demonstrated your power. You've shown that you can destroy any species that opposes you. What happens if humanity becomes the oppressor? Morrison looked at the Helix ambassador. Keelan had been one of the few to show humanity kindness during their probation. His species remained independent and prosperous because of that choice. That's a fair question, Morrison said, and I don't have a perfect answer. Power corrupts. We know that. Earth's history is full of empires that started with noble intentions and became tyrannical. Maybe humanity will become what we fought against. Maybe in 100 years some other species will need to put us down like we put down the Zenthari. She paused, letting the words sink in. But I can tell you this. We remember what it's like to be powerless. We remember 200 years of being treated like primitives. We remember the contempt, the insults, the theft. And we remember that when we finally snapped, the galaxy burned. Morrison's expression hardened. We will try to be better than those who came before us. We will try to be fair, to be just, to protect rather than exploit. But if another species rises to challenge us, if someone decides to test whether humanity still has teeth, they'll find out that Deathworlders don't forget, and we definitely don't forgive. The council session ended. Representatives filed out, some angry, some resigned, some simply exhausted. A new era had begun, built on ashes and blood and the determination of one species to never be victims again. On Earth, in a small apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Sarah Chen stood on her balcony watching the sunset. The sky was orange and red, beautiful in the way that Earth always was. Her home world, her death world, the planet that forged humanity in fire. She thought about the war, about the people who died, human and alien alike, about the civilizations destroyed and the new order being built on their ruins. She thought about whether it was worth it. Her communicator buzzed. A message from Admiral Morrison. Sarah, I need your advice. The Vextral species is requesting admission to the Shield Worlds program. They were one of the species that voted against us at every opportunity. Do we protect them now? Sarah smiled sadly. That was the question, wasn't it? Did humanity become the monsters or did they become the heroes? Did they use their power to dominate or to protect? Did they learn from the mistakes of the species that came before or repeat them? She typed her response, we protect them. Not because they deserve it, but because we're better than they were. We don't become them. We become what we wanted them to be. She sent the message and returned to watching the sunset. The war was over. The galaxy had burned, and now humanity had to figure out what to build from the ashes. They had proven they could destroy. The harder task was proving they could create. The Deathworlders had snapped. They had shown the galaxy their teeth, their claws, their capacity for violence. Now they had to show something else. Their capacity for mercy, for justice, for building something better than what came before. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about being human ever was. But then again, humans were from Earth, they were survivors. They were persistence predators. They didn't give up, and maybe, just maybe, they could turn their victory in war into a victory for peace. Time would tell. But for now, the galaxy was quiet, and humanity stood watch, making sure it stayed that way. The wolf might have left the sheep pen, but it remembered being prey. And that memory would shape everything that came after.